Knock knock. My god. On March 31st, the world will be treated to the fourth entry of the Warner Brothers and Legendary co-produced kaiju cinematic universe, commonly known as the Monsterverse. The film, Godzilla vs. Kong, had a trailer drop a few months ago, and I've seen it over a dozen times. It looks perfect. And since the internet lost its mind the last time there was one of these cinematic universe entries dropping, I thought that I would enter the discourse since I wrote a 6,000 word essay on the subject. Let's go! To preface, I will only be discussing these three films. I will not go into a deep dive of the Toho films. I will not be discussing the 1998 train wreck that I absolutely loved as a cinematic experience, nor will I be getting into the amazing Shin Godzilla from 2016. I'm just one man. I can't be expected to talk about the generations-long history of this radioactive iguana, nor can I be expected to talk about the as long as cinema itself history of King Kong. Films featuring giant monsters have been in cinemas since as long as the moving pictures, having an adaptation of The Lost World be released in 1925. Then, everyone's favorite big monkey shows up, King Kong, in RKO's 1933 film. After scores of B-movies like Them in the 1950s, Doug McClure's entire career in the 60s and 70s, and of course the Toho Godzilla films, these giant monster movies didn't get a true blockbuster treatment until 1993's Jurassic Park. The films mostly had heavy themes that dealt with the anxieties of the cultures that produced them. So, with Godzilla, we had the abject horror of the nuclear bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Them was an allegory of the Cold War and the fear of the spread of communism. Even back in 1933, King Kong had, well, the noble savage, the power of civilization, and the fear of losing our pure white women. Not all of them aged well. In the decade prior to the Monsterverse, giant monster movies kind of hit a bit of a snag. A kerfuffle, if you will. A big fucking problem. After 9/11, audiences didn't really want to watch big monsters run into buildings and have them come crashing down. There was a 2005 adaptation of King Kong by Peter Jackson, but that was more of a love letter to the original film rather than bringing anything new to the table, other than having Andy Serkis motion capture a big ape, something that he would do in the Rise of the Planet of the Apes franchise. But for 7 years, there was no big monster movies in Hollywood. That is, until Cloverfield. In 2008, J.J. Abrams produced Matt Reeves' film, written by Drew Goddard, that brought a seriousness and a somberness to the giant monster genre that hadn't been seen since probably 1954's Godzilla. It was a giant monster attacking New York City, and the found footage element added a visceral thrill to the experience, bringing the audience to the perspective of the characters on the ground. Say what you will about the current state of the Cloverfield franchise, the original is brilliant. The later 2000s and early 2010s didn't bring very many American-produced kaiju films. There was a British independent film, Monsters, by director Gareth Edwards, that was a road trip from Mexico to America in a frontier surrounded by Lovecraftian giant tentacle monsters. And of course, there was the 2013 pre-fish fuckery Guillermo del Toro film Pacific Rim, where humanity was protected from interdimensional monsters called kaijus by giant robots. Both films were smash successes, and Pacific Rim in particular brought in a Japanese aesthetic, which set the stage for the first entry in the Monsterverse. The Monsterverse kicked off before the Monsterverse was even an idea with 2014's Godzilla, directed by Gareth Edwards. Originally pitched as a trilogy, the film was retrofitted to become the entry point into their cinematic universe. Already, Legendary was setting the stage brilliantly by bringing in a filmmaker well versed in visual effects with limited resources. The only film under his belt prior to Godzilla was the previously stated Monsters, an ultra-low-budget creature feature with the visuals created by Edwards himself. This made him an obvious candidate for when Godzilla would return to cinemas. The 2014 film had a bit of a Star Wars problem, namely that there was a film in the 90s that tainted the brand, and this new iteration of the franchise had to remind the audience why they enjoyed these films in the first place. Instead of doing the J.J. Abrams approach, which was mainly just tell the same story with new paint, Edwards took a different approach, bringing in a new story with original creatures that Godzilla had to fight, along with bringing his relationship to humanity, that we are insects and he doesn't care about us. What makes this movie work? Well, the casting of Bryan Cranston as nuclear engineer Joe Brody, and literally everything that happens in the prologue of the film. He has his entire world come crashing down on him with the giant monster spectacular that happens in his nuclear power plant.
We don't see any of the monster attacks, but from the control center, we feel the earth shake and the terror in his eyes as he realizes his wife Sandra is in harm's way near the epicenter of the nuclear breach.
I don't know much about science, but I saw Chernobyl, so I know that's not good.
And the decision for the script to have him close the doors to keep the radiation from leaking, with his wife stuck on the other side.
It's a sequence filled with tension and tough choices that define character.
That last moment with his wife, when they are on either sides of the door, it got me, guys. When we find him in the modern day, he's been on a couple of forums and is spouting some conspiracy nonsense.
And if your dad is talking about how the government is hiding giant monsters from us, that's not the worst conspiracy for him to be involved in. Then he has another monologue where Cranston is acting the hell out of everything, and then he starts yelling about my wife before taking a tumble and leaving the cinematic universe far too early. Another thing this film does well is show the size of the monsters and the scale of the destruction. It does a lot to show the perspective of these gargantuan creatures.
One of the best shots of the film is seeing Godzilla's dorsal fins dive underneath an aircraft carrier.
It's fucking rad. And the creature design of the Mutos, massive unidentified terrestrial organisms, is pretty great too. What with their striking angular silhouettes, their glowing red eyes, and the differences of their physiology, whether they're male or female. And the idea that these creatures lay their eggs in the carcasses of dead Godzillas so they can feed off of their nuclear radiation. That shit is yes.
And the fact that these creatures use an EMP blast when they arrive is a great way to build anticipation. When the power cuts out, we know shit is happening.
With the Godzilla and the Mutos fight scenes, the destruction of the buildings has actual weight to it. You feel the buildings crumble. At the end of the fight, it's exactly what you want in a Godzilla movie. Godzilla slaps one of the Mutos with his tail, crashing him into a building and having it tumble down on him. And then the last one, he grabs her by the neck, pulls her back, and then breathes his atomic breath down her throat. It's good stuff. Dare I say, peak cinema. The film does have its issues, namely every character not portrayed by Bryan Cranston or Ken Watanabe. The film suffers very similar to the way World War Z suffers because it's mostly kind of a travelogue where the main character, Ford Brody, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, just kind of shows up in all the important parts. The only goal he seems to have is to return to his wife Ellie, played by Elizabeth Olsen, and his son. I'm just gonna skip over the part that they played twins in a Marvel movie, which, yikes. Ford doesn't have any connection to the story after his father dies, but the plot twists and contorts like a Cirque du Soleil artist to keep him in the story. Let's track his actions in the movie. I have a visual.
First, he goes to Japan to find his crazy dad. Then, after his dad dies, he ends up on a Navy ship. Then he's in Hawaii because he's getting on another flight to go home to San Francisco. But a Muto attack makes him join an army unit that takes him to a random town in California, to then join a unit to travel a bomb to a place and send it into the San Francisco Bay. But That gets attacked by a Muto, and he's the only survivor. Then he finally gets back to San Francisco with another unit to try and disarm the bomb. But it doesn't work, so he sends it out to sea and is rescued before the bomb goes off.
It's very episodic, and his actions don't relate to his character because he doesn't have a character. Yes, his mom and his dad were both killed by these giant creatures, but nothing in the story compels him to relate to the conflict in any deeper way. It's kind of weird, actually. And he's an EOD technician in the Navy. Doesn't he have a unit to go back to? Wouldn't he be recalled the moment these creatures emerged? Why is he allowed to bounce around from unit to unit? It doesn't make sense. He's kind of a blank slate. A nothing character, with nothing to allow the audience to empathize with him deeper than him person. He does have one moment where the film tries to show his
good nature by helping a tourist child on a train in Hawaii after the doors close, separating him from his family. But after he says that he'll ride back with him to the station, he says, "I better not miss my flight, kid."
The audience can't have one moment to see that he cares about somebody other than himself before the film undercuts the moment immediately.
So, when the inevitable carnage happens, his attempts to save the kid doesn't do anything. He's a speed bump on his way back to his own family.
Another problem the film has is the way it teases the audience with the fight scenes and the Godzilla reveal in general. Gareth Edwards knows exactly what he's doing
when he shows Godzilla and the Muto converge on each other in Hawaii before cutting to news footage of the event.
Like, come on, you Welsh prick. Give me what I paid for. I'm only kidding, Gareth, who's obviously watching this. I really appreciate it.
And the fact that they hide Godzilla for the majority of the movie, it's frustrating. He has like 8 minutes of screen time. We don't even get a good look at him if it's not his fin or his tail until the third act.
But I think teasing Godzilla out to the audience could work to a point. At the 56-minute mark, Godzilla finally comes out of the ocean.
There's flares that go up, and we see a shot of his chest, a shot of his hands, and a shot of his tail with the destruction that he caused as he moves past.
After that, please, give me Godzilla. Here's a stylistic issue that I have with the film. It's too dark.
The whole film is shot at night with gray sky. It's like the 98 Godzilla, where they're trying to use the rain and stuff to mask bad CGI.
If I pay to watch a movie where monsters are fighting, I want to be able to see the monsters and the fighting. All in all, 2014's Godzilla is fine. It's fine.
Having such a blank slate of a character wander around the wake of these creatures helps with showing the parallels of the disasters this film is clearly taking influence from.
And I do have a bone to pick. When this movie came out, there was a lot of body shaming going around, calling him Fat Godzilla. And look, he might not be in the best shape of his life, but he's been sheltering in place for eons. Don't tell me that you were in the best shape of your life after a couple months of quarantine. This is what I looked like before quarantine.
Insert picture of The Rock.
And the movie does have its great moments too. Like the female Muto doing to Vegas what I metaphorically do every time I go there. And the choice to hold back on his nuclear breath till the very end is a fantastic way to build anticipation. You're watching this movie and you're like, you forget that he has that power. But then all of a sudden, his fins start glowing blue and you're like, here we go, yes, boom! It's pretty good. And no discussion of this film is complete without touching on Ken Watanabe's character, who not only carries his father's watch that is stopped at the moment that the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, which clearly touches on the themes of the original Godzilla, but also utters probably the single greatest line in all of 2010 cinema with, "Let them fight." Hell yeah, dude. Ultimately, the film set the stage for what is to come, but is unfortunately a forgettable entry into a very new cinematic universe. Are we doing ratings? Because I guess 6 out of 10 Godzilla screams. I don't know. That brings us to Kong Skull Island. Again, Legendary is doing something that the Marvel Universe took a while to do and is yet to fully embrace. Bring in up-and-coming filmmakers to direct their giant films. His directorial debut, The Kings of Summer, is a coming-of-age comedy with a budget of $1.5 million. So Legendary gave him $183.5 million more to make a big monkey movie in the jungle. And I'll tell you a secret. It fucking slaps. So the one thing Skull Island has over its predecessor is that it's a prequel. Now hold on, I know what you're about to say. Prequel, it's just a naughty word when it comes to movies. The Hobbit, Star Wars, Dumb and Dumberer, they never work. I agree in those instances, mainly because those prequels are trying to tell a larger story that connects them to the original films to the detriment of the stories that are being told. However, in Skull Island, it is a complete standalone narrative. The only connective tissue, apart from a post-credit scene, is the organization of Monarch. You can come into the film without any knowledge that it's a part of a cinematic universe or know anything about Godzilla and have a good time. So, where to start on such a brilliant piece of cinematic brilliance? Well, let's start with the cast. And I'm not just talking about your run-of-the-mill Toms Hiddleston, your John Goodmans, no. I am talking about everyone in the film. They are phenomenal.
Corey Hawkins and Jason Mitchell from Straight Outta Compton. Richard Jenkins in one scene as a politician. Shea Wingham from every period piece as everyone's functional alcoholic uncle. Is that Brett Favre? Toby Kebbell in two roles, one of which is a mocap monkey. TV's Mark Evan Jackson. Jing Tian from The Great Wall. The previously stated John Goodman. Not one, not two, but 3 Marvel alums in Tom Hiddleston, Brie Larson, and the always great Samuel L. Jackson.
Am I forgetting somebody? Yes.
John C. Reilly is in this thing as a pilot who has been stranded on the island since World War II, and he makes the movie.
And the thing about this is, everyone knows exactly what type of movie they are in. This is the type of movie where, when the audience needs exposition to be relayed to them, the characters lean in real close, they lower their voices, and talk very seriously indeed. And if they are in a bar, they raise their glasses up, just a little bit. If you want character arcs or pesky planting and payoffs, you've come to the wrong movie. I've seen this film many, many times, and I still need to have the IMDb open to know what anyone's character is named. But honestly, that kind of helps this movie. Actually, there is one character arc, but we will get to that later. This film is a bare-bones plot used as a vehicle to expand the Monsterverse and lay the groundwork for future films. I should hate this movie. I have a film degree. This could be compared to one of the worst films in the Transformers franchise. But I totally dig it.
You can complain all you want that the conflict with the Skullcrawlers isn't fully developed, but the film is more in line with the Adventure to Strange Land stories. The Skullcrawlers are a part of it, but the real conflict is whether the characters will survive the island. From the daddy longlegs to the bird dinosaurs to the native people. Yeah, that's there.
Who needs themes when you've got characters spouting out the Hollow Earth theory? Who wants a fulfilling love story subplot when you have a big monkey eating a big octopus? Who wants character arcs when you've got John C. Reilly talking about wanting to see the Cubs win the World Series? Woo! Woo! We did it, John. 2016. Woo! Go Cubs, go! So yes, John C. Reilly's Hank Marlowe is the best character in the film. And that's probably because they gave him a fulfilling backstory.
Everyone else is delineated into very simple stereotypes. Tracker, soldier, war photographer, scientist.
Well, we're back already? I thought that was going to be a longer cut. And man who is trapped on an island for decades can also be seen as a stock character. Hell, he's just playing the character of Ben Gunn in Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island. And, like Gunn, he says some pretty outlandish stuff too, showing that the years of isolation has warped his reality.
However, they bring in the character of Ikari, the Japanese pilot he was marooned with and subsequently died. This bond, which we are never shown happen in the film, comes out with his somber talks to his grave, the respect he shows to the katana, and quoting the Bushido code, death before dishonor.
Adding this element to the character, giving him a full life on the island, allows us to empathize with him more.
And the final scene with the people of the island, the goodbye he gives, makes them less stereotypical.
They helped this man when they could have just left him to the elements or the big-ass spider. It brings humanity to their culture. The empathy John C. Reilly brings to the role is probably why
The last shots of the film of Marlowe reuniting with his family after all this time are so impactful.
this is how you make a stock character turn into the heart of your film. As I said earlier, there is a character who has an arc in this film, but it's less of an arc and more of a plummet, likened only to Thelma and Louise at the end of the film Thelma and Louise. Spoilers for Thelma and Louise. I am talking, of course, about Samuel L. Jackson's character, Colonel Preston Packard.
Much like Jack Torrance in The Shining, there is something off about him when we first meet him.
He's very mad about Vietnam, and not the why are we fighting in this quagmire mad, but more of the we should fight harder and why are we giving up mad. Immediately after their first encounter with Kong, there is a cut to Colonel Packard where the expression that he gives on his face can only be compared to Martin Lawrence in the great Bad Boys 2, Shit Just Got Real. As Tom Hiddleston and Brie Larson have fun times with John C. Reilly, Kong, and that big water buffalo, Packard and his men have a journey that is likened only to Heart of Darkness.
They are the ones that deal with the big-ass spider, and he gets fueled by the sight of Kong's blood.
Everyone else in the film gets moments with these creatures that show the awe of nature, but not Packard. When the protagonists finally reunite with Packard, he's gone full-on Colonel Kurtz. He's a simple man, a soldier who only knows how to find his enemy and to eliminate it, whether it's the Viet Cong or King Kong. Wait, was that pun just the reason why they said it in Viet? But you see, Packard isn't just some mindless bad guy. He's shown to genuinely care about his men. And while he does go all cuckoo bananas in the end, he's shown to be a leader that when shit hits the fan, you would follow.
He's dogged in his pursuit of a single lost soldier, something that, regarding their situation, what with the creatures, proves ultimately futile. But it's his very specific need to avenge his fistful of dog tags that clouds his judgment and gets him to lead his men into a fight that could be wrong?
What? Vietnam parallel? Wrong? Never. But he's blinded by his need to defeat his enemy that even in his final moments, when he knows there's something badder and bigger out there, all he wants to do is beat Kong. The film also enhances the King Kong mythos while putting everything in there.
Yes, there is the native people, who are stereotypically native, but they're not a threat. There is no talk of human sacrifices to Kong.
Although that could still be there because they have some sort of symbiotic relationship with Kong, because he protects them, but what do they give him? And these films are talking about these things are titans that were worshipped by early humans, and primitive cultures definitely have human sacrifices in them, but hey, this movie doesn't have it, so we're not gonna go there. And the big gorilla likes white lady subplot is mostly gone. There's no Beauty that killed the Beast line or a scene similar to him climbing up the Empire State Building or anything.
There's just one scene where Brie Larson touches his nose, and then the final action scene where he fights with her in his hand.
The other thing this film does better than barrels of big budget blockbuster bonanzas is that it looks gorgeous. The film is shot during the day, so we can see all of the large scale action clearly, and that enhances the experience. Cinematographer Larry Fong cut his teeth on visual effects driven blockbusters,
working primarily with Zack Snyder. Say what you will about Snyder's films,
and trust me, I do. Snyder cut!
The artistry of his images are not in dispute. Fong was cinematographer on Watchmen, Sucker Punch, Super 8, and 300. Is he plagiarizing himself? He puts in brilliant shots, like this one with the explosion reflecting out of the aviators, the close-up of Nixon during the storm, and this shot of Kong with the sun behind him. The cinematography does the difficult task of showing what is happening in the wide shots, like these helicopters going through a storm, that brings the audience into the helicopters to show the chaos that it feels like without getting overly complicated.
And yeah, that's Kong Skull Island for you. I could talk about theme, like how the environmental subtext
of the film is shown. Hiddleston puts down a soldier's gun while Brie Larson snaps a photograph.
How it's about how nature has a balance or something, and man should sometimes just leave it alone.
How the final shot of the disheveled heroes on the island represents that civilization isn't all that it's cracked up to be, and some places of the world aren't meant for us. And leaving Kong on the island at the end, rather than taking him to New York City, shows that in this iteration, we cannot bend nature to our will.
But I'd much prefer to talk about how Kong uses this rusted propeller like a flail. The theme is very service level. I know this film is essentially cinematic McDonald's, empty calories that don't add up to much intellectual introspection. But I guess I thought a lot about this big monkey movie, and every once in a while I like a Royale with cheese and some chicken nuggies. So I guess 10 out of 10 gorilla chest pounds? Perfect movie, Oscar snub. I don't care. Oh yeah, and I didn't even talk about the big ape graveyard they fucking walk through, okay? It's a fantastic scene where they mount a 50 cal on the skull of a triceratops, and then one of the big skull crawlers vomits out a skull and there's flesh still on the thing. And then John Goodman gets... The third entry of the Monsterverse is 2019's Godzilla: King of the Monsters. For King of the Monsters, Legendary tapped writer-director Michael Dougherty to helm the project. He cut his teeth writing films that comic book fans love, like X2, or maybe not so love, like Superman Returns, before taking the role of director for his 2 horror scripts, the fantastic Trick or Treat and the I honestly haven't seen it, but I heard it was well received fine. Okay, it has a 66 on Rotten Tomatoes, but that doesn't actually mean anything, Krampus. You see, this decision is interesting, because it's moving away from the up-and-coming but energetic young filmmakers to more journeyman but established directors. He had never helmed anything this big, but he was connected to the X-Men franchise in its early days, and was even credited as a story writer for X-Men Apocalypse. But don't hold that against him, because Godzilla, King of the Monsters, it's pretty good. So what does King of the Monsters bring to the table? Monster fights. It brings monster fights. Instead of a brief clash that cuts away to news footage as a pretty shitty way to build anticipation for the final showdown, we get
a Godzilla and Ghidorah fight in the first act, and we see the nuclear breath and Ghidorah's electric powers in full effect.
But it's not just that we see the fights, it's that the fights are used as a storytelling device that show the growth of these monster characters.
It's like a boxing movie where the fights represent the personal struggles of the characters, but in monster fights. In their first encounter, Godzilla fights Ghidorah, and Ghidorah is able to beat him before flying away. Their next encounter comes after Rodan is awakened and has already fought and lost to Ghidorah. Godzilla comes up and takes Ghidorah down to his turf, under the sea. He seems to be winning, biting off one of the 3 heads of the dragon before America does what America does and bombs the shit out of them. Ghidorah rises, triumphant, awakens the Titans, and they all bend to his will. The final fight sequence in Boston has Godzilla be the underdog, even with Mothra's help and the nuclear-enhanced juice that he had, before going all Bikini Atoll on his ass.
And because these fights don't stop the story dead to show carnage for carnage's sake, but enhances the story by exploring the characters of these giant monsters, I give it a thumbs up. It's good. One way this film distinguishes itself above its previous entries is the score by Bear McCreary. Skull Island had a solid soundtrack, full of needle drops that set the story in the 70s and the Vietnam War, but the score is serviceable. Now, I'm by no means a music expert, but I enjoy movie scores, and this one's good. McCreary delivers. He does this in a very fan service way by reusing the score of the original 1954 Godzilla,
but turns it from this destructive piece of existential dread to triumphant walk-up music of a baseball player walking up to the batter's box. After he gets shocked back to life with a nuclear bomb and the submarine surfaces to survive the blast, the 54 theme starts slowly, with added chants, until Godzilla surfaces out of the water. The music engulfs the score, the chants get louder, faster, and Godzilla stands on the ocean, looks down at our heroes, gives a nod, and shoots a big blue beam into the sky before heading off to fight Ghidorah. And when he finally arrives in Boston, and the fighter jets are flanking him on either side, what music does the film choose to play after the iconic roar? The 1954 theme.
That is how you respect a cinematic classic. And the credit sequence is cut to a cover of the Blue Oyster Cult song Godzilla, and it fucking bangs. You may be asking, where is my beautiful house? And you may be asking, why are you talking about the people characters? Because who cares? We honestly have more characterization in the 3 distinct heads of Ghidorah than we do in any of the people in the movie.
But most of them are doing serviceable work. We've got O'Shea Jackson Jr. in the movie, another straight outta Compton alum, as Soldier Man who has a moment to save a kid, Kyle Chandler as Dad who looks at wolves, Vera Farmiga as Mom to 11 from Stranger Things, who talks to monsters with an iPad, Bradley Whitford as...
It's gonna be a bad day to be a Red Sox fan.
What? They tried Mookie Betts again? Go Cubs.
Thomas Middletich as Jokes, David Strahan as Exposition Bomb, Zhang Ziyi from some fantastic Chinese movies as 2 characters, a take on the Mothra fairies from the old Toho films, and Ken Watanabe as his character from the first movie.
Let them fight.
While not having character arcs absolutely works in Skull Island, it doesn't really work in the story that they're trying to tell with King of the Monsters. But because the monster fighting is so good, we don't care. Or I don't care. Another thing that is further expanded in this film is having human antagonists. From one crazy military colonel in Skull Island, we get everyone's favorite big bad daddy, Charles Dance, as eco-terrorist Justice Wargrave. Is an Agatha Christie film too specific? I don't care. His plans are nonsensical and are essentially there to lead to Godzilla fights. But because we have a human antagonist being the cause for the Godzilla fights, they seem less episodic than they did in the 2014 film.
And while I love me some bad daddy Charles Dance, who eats up every scene he's in, there is one issue with the antagonist in the film, and that comes from Vera Farmiga's character, Dr. Emma Russell. This film is trying to be clearer about its pro-environmentalism stance, which is shown through Kyle Chandler's Mark Russell being an animal behavior specialist and having his introductory scene taking photographs of wolves in the wild. That works. And having the bad guys be eco-terrorists, same goal but different ways to achieving it, that works too. And having Vera Farmiga's Emma secretly work with the terrorists in order to heal the planet through the radiation of the monsters makes sense, especially after seeing the destruction of 2 cities and the death of a child in San Francisco, making you a bit fanatical.
But after having a fire pterodactyl come out of a volcano
to rain hellfire on the people of an isla.
Isla Sorna? Maybe people shouldn't live in islas. Live on the mainland, it's safer. Maybe don't give that character a redemption arc. Maybe don't have her try to be sympathetic in the end. She knows what these creatures do, right? But it's a structural issue where we can see the problem to this character.
First meet her, and we have neutral to good feelings about her. She's mom to 11. Everyone likes 11. Then the terrorists quote-unquote kidnap her and her tech to talk to monsters. Now we're worried. Double on her side. Then it's revealed to Mark that no, actually she is in league with the bad guys. Then she has a change of heart when 11 is in danger and she sees what she did is wrong and sacrifices herself and dies in Godzilla's nuclear fusion or fission. Scientists, don't at me on that one. Now, the audience goes from liking her to caring about her to being somewhat confused to not liking her to supposed to care about her.
That's too much of an emotional roller coaster for what's essentially Big Lizard Smash movie. And now, I'm going to address the issues I have with this film. Legendary. Booby, you gotta listen to me. I'm your white knight. Having your monster fights happen in the dead of night in a torrential downpour isn't very exciting, actually. It's kind of lame.
I appreciate the movie isn't kinda gray, like it's shot from some day for night filter, but following Kong Skull Island, the visuals aren't what I was hoping for. The added color to each respective monster, red for Rodan, blue for Godzilla, yellow for Ghidorah, and some tealish neon for Mothra, gives each of them a color palette.
But it would have been more fun if the film decided to figure a way to work that into the movie a little bit more. The plot is barely sufficient, if I'm being honest. Yes, I like your monster fights, but if I don't care about your human characters, please don't make this broken marriage between Coach Taylor and Leo's psychologist from The Departed be such an important aspect of your movie. 7 out of 10 Ghidorah Thunderbolts and a Mothra Shriek? I don't know. So yeah, that's the Monsterverse. I definitely prefer Kong Skull Island, and maybe I should have just made a video on Kong Skull Island, but I committed to the bit, and so I'm gonna finish it. What was that? How do I think Godzilla vs. Kong is gonna go? Barring a Save Mothra incident, I think there's gonna be a mad scientist involved somewhere. He's gonna goad Godzilla to fight Kong, or vice versa. Clearly seems like Godzilla is goaded to fighting Kong in the trailers, and if there is a winner in the movie, which I hope there is, Kong wins. Not only is he the American product, so Eagle Scream here, I also think that it's honestly, it's much less exciting if Godzilla wins. Like, Godzilla is a nuclear reactor, and so Kong beating Godzilla is much more, it's Rocky. It's Rocky. Kong's gonna win because it's Rocky. But I think they're gonna have to team up together to fight whatever that mad scientist that caused them to fight each other has in store. Maybe the mad scientist is an alien and has Gigantic. Legendary should just throw everything out there and see what sticks, because... Also, Lance Reddick is in this movie. Lance Cedric fucking Daniels is in Godzilla vs. Kong. Okay? So, everybody watch it. If you're vaccinated, go to the theater, watch it. If you're not, stay at home and watch it on HBO Max. It's on HBO Max. Thanks for watching my video. Like and subscribe, and I'll be giving you more of these videos in the future.